All right. Hi, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a second. A few housekeeping items. We are live streaming this event. When the time comes, we'll also record it. And we'll be able to share details about the recording and everything else in an email follow-up for those who are attending the webinar on Zoom. For those of you who are attending on Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter, and LinkedIn events, hello. It's so great to see you. We'll get started here in just one moment. All right. Let's get started. So, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this workshop, Running an STI Report from BroadStreet.io. My name is Tracy Flood, and joining me today is the author of the STI report, Kalama Kalemahohe Porter, also known as Kalei Porter. So Kalei will be around for any questions. It'll be my honor and pleasure to give you the tour today. So the outline is as follows. So first we want to start by learning a little bit more about you. That really does help us to customize this workshop. And then also giving a little bit of background on BroadStreet and the STI story. And then finally, we'll do a step-by-step walkthrough in real time on how to run an STI story for your region. All right, for some housekeeping items. So this is a live webinar and workshop, and it is currently streaming live on several different platforms. And I'll be hitting record within this Zoom webinar after the poll. So the recording of the live event, as well as the cleaner recording, will be available and shared on email in the next week or so. All right, if at any time you have any questions, those who are here in the Zoom room with all of us can ask with the Q&A button. So there's actually a little Q&A button. If you move your mouse around, you can see it at the bottom of the screen. And it's a great place to ask questions. You can ask questions at any time while I'm screen sharing. I may not see it right away, but there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end. All right. All right, so let's start with a little bit of background on you, and whichever platform you're joining from, feel free to answer. I'll start with a little bit of a poll here. So first and foremost, I'm currently located in Wisconsin, just outside of Milwaukee. Calay's in Kansas City. Where are you from? What's the weather like where you are? Autumn leaves are falling, if everything's looking nice and colorful. Snow is falling, which has been true for some of us. Sunshine, rain and overcast, or other? That's the first question. The second question is, do you identify as a data person? So to us, a data person is someone, really anyone, who enjoys working with data for anything like reports, research, grants, education and advocacy. It can really include anyone who's an enthusiast, someone who's doing it professionally as a data scientist, an analyst, a consultant, or a statistician. Really, the list goes on. I think that some people get very excited about data and might self-identify as a data person. Some people also work with teams of data people. And then before this webinar, which of the following were you familiar with? So during this webinar, we'll be going over a few different tools, such as BroadStreet.io. Also, we'll be mentioning the CDC's Atlas Plus, as well as the American Community Survey. Also, we'll be referencing a phrase called the social determinants of health. Please let us know if that's familiar to you, if any or all of those are familiar to you. All right, and then if you are familiar with BroadStreet before, what have you done so far on BroadStreet.io? So please feel free to select all that apply. I got to the login screen. I created a free account and logged in, visited the map room, ran a report, edited the reports. Not applicable, I'm brand new to BroadStreet. This will really just help us to figure out the direction to go during this session. All right, we'll give it just a few more seconds. Anyone who's joining us on different platforms, feel free to comment on any of the topics I just said. All right. Got one more vote coming in here. All right, I'm going to end the poll there, and I'm going to talk through some of the different responses. So, what's the weather like? For many of you, the autumn leaves are falling, and actually for a lot of you, the sun is shining, which obviously is very, very nice. Thank you for joining us here on Zoom for this sunny day. Do you identify as a data person? Actually, 100% of everyone in the audience today, at least those in the Zoom room with us, said yes. So obviously that's very cool. We're data people. We love talking to other data people. We also are happy to share tools for non-data people, but always great to know that we all share a love of data. All right, before this webinar, which of the following were you familiar with? Please select all that apply. Some people were familiar with BroadStreet, about a third. Some people were familiar with the American Community Survey, about a third. Nobody was familiar with CDC Atlas Plus, so I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that. And then everyone was familiar with the phrase social determinants of health, so that's pretty awesome. If you were familiar with BroadStreet before, what have you done on BroadStreet.io? Okay, so actually a majority of you said you're brand new to BroadStreet. And for those of you that made it onto BroadStreet.io, some of you made it to the login screen, some of you created a free account. Nobody has yet made it to the map room or run a report. So this tutorial and workshop is going to be perfect for you. So that is actually incredibly helpful. And thank you everyone so much for sharing that with us. All right, so now as promised, I want to give you a little bit of background about BroadStreet. So Calais and I are both affiliated with BroadStreet and have been working with BroadStreet for quite some time now. BroadStreet was originally founded as part of the open data, open code movement. All three co-founders originally met at a community center in an old abandoned mall in downtown Milwaukee, and came together over a love of this idea of open data and data accessible to all. And so one of the founding principles and beliefs is that we believe that good data can heal the world. And we genuinely believe that anyone working to improve health in their community should have access to the best data possible. We obviously believe that reducing data disparities is incredibly important. Obviously, some places have access to a ton of data, so much that they don't even know what to do with it. Some people haven't seen an epidemiologist in the 60-mile vicinity around their community in years. And so we really want to work to reduce those data disparities and to make sure that data is freely accessible to everyone who's working to improve health in their community. So with that in mind, what we do is we assemble and share good data. And what do we mean by good data? So by good data, what we really mean is data that has good coverage. It's really nice when it's available, not just in one city, not just in one state, but across the entire United States. We do have the geographical region of the United States, and is available and used at a, sorry, and the second criteria is it's available at a useful geography. So what do we mean by a useful geography? So I think that it's pretty plain when something is not at a useful geography. So for instance, if we gave you a national rate, you might think to yourself, how do I take action on that? Do I know where to target resources? Do I know how to strategize in different regions? And do I know where to place my resources most effectively? And so what I would say is that when we say something is available at a useful geography, what we mean is an actionable geography. So is it a small enough region and even a big enough region that it makes sense to take action, that you can guide resources and efforts? Sometimes that means a county, sometimes that means something smaller like a neighborhood or a block group. In any case, it's really nice if it can be summarized for your service area or the regions that you cover. And we understand if you have multiple stakeholders and you're part of a multi-stakeholder collaborative and everyone has a slightly different region, obviously what they mean by a useful geography might be a little bit different. It's very meaningful for us to assemble data at a useful geography. And then finally, the third thing is benchmarks. We really love it when benchmarks can be created. That means comparing what we see in one region to state or national benchmarks, even benchmarking and trends and changes over time. Really anything that helps us to get a sense of like, is this good or bad or normal or something that we should be taking action on? Obviously, that's really important. So that's what we mean by good data. We mean there's good coverage. We mean that the data are available at a useful geography, and we mean that the data are available for benchmarking. So that's what good data means to us. And what we like to do is assemble and share it. And when we share it in things like live events, we share it in data downloads, we share it in software like BroadStreet.io. We're really excited to be able to share data with many thousands of organizations and nonprofits, organizations and government organizations and educational organizations really around the US. And we're very, very proud of our membership base. All right, so once we assemble data, if we're putting it into the BroadStreet data engine, it goes into the BroadStreet data engine, and you'll see what that means in just a moment. For the STI report, I'm going to say we're very happy to say that we did find some good data, thanks to Clay and the efforts there of the writing team. And we were able to find data on STIs thanks to the CDC's effort in collecting that information with good coverage across the US and with good standardization, so benchmarks could be created, and even good granularity, so at a useful geography of what is usually county for STIs. So that's the health outcome of STIs. We also wanted to essentially create a theory of change model. So we were looking at outcomes of STIs, not only outcomes, but also what's happening upstream, what demographics are associated with different levels of risk and protective factors. And so we really wanted to create a full story around not only the health outcome, but the different health factors that go into that. All right, so that's probably enough of a bit of a preamble. So let's get started on the site. So if you've never been to BroadStreet before, I'm going to say the very first thing you want to go to is BroadStreet.io, and I'll be sharing my screen here in just a moment. All right, BroadStreet.io. It does require a login for our members. If you're seeing some sort of prompt to activate your membership, feel free to close that for now. You're actually able to create an account and 3 reports absolutely free. And when the time comes to activate your account, if you'd like to, that does obviously support us, but no changes will be made to those original 3 reports. So you can make them with confidence. Okay, a little bit of a preamble there. So what are we looking at? So what we're looking at is a software platform that looks awfully pretty and nice with lots of cards. You can see that the entire site is built on cards. What you might not see is that there's actually a very powerful data engine sitting behind it. So to get a glimpse into our data dictionary, you can go into our indicator list, for instance. You can also take a dive into our map room to see all of the indicators that we have available. Certain select indicators we've assembled into what we call stories. So in these cases, stories have actually been created and templates have been made, and I'll show you how to create those in just a moment. All right, what else is on here that you kind of a little bit of orientation on? Up here is the little help toggle. This does lead to a person. If a person's not readily available, it does lead to an email. So we do obviously want to support you in the best way that we're able. If you toggle on the help, it'll lead you both to our article list, our help articles, and also to the email of a person. We also have a learning center with lots of help articles, and we have things here like saved areas. This is where if you wanted to create and set up your areas, you could. I've got a lot of them, so let's just give it a moment to load. All right, so these are all of my named areas. Boom, there they are. These are all of the regions that I've set up that I find useful. I've also done what's called favorites, my cards. So the cards that I really like, I've favorited and I've saved them here underneath my favorites. I also have a page for stories. So any stories that I've run from a template or assembled from scratch will be available here later on underneath my stories. If I've made any maps in the map room, the maps are saved here. And then finally, that data dictionary is what I just showed, and you're able to ask a question. That does the same thing as the help toggle, and you can also go to the Learning Center. All right, so that's just a little bit of tour. This is the home page. That's the left navigation. And I think the very next thing is to get started with these little cards here. So these little cards, we sometimes refer to as report cards. They actually lead to a report building wizard. What I'm about to do is I'm about ready to create this report. It's a little cooking show style where I show the finished version first. I'm going to create this report with all of the graphics and customized regions for a region that interests me in Wisconsin here. And of course, if you're building it for your own region, you can do the same. All right. So let's start here in the sexually transmitted infection report. I do have a lot of saved areas, as you saw from the left navigation. For this, I want to create a new area, actually. In BroadStreet, in the BroadStreet data engine, you're able to select from a list of zip codes, a list of counties, which many people use, and a list of cities, villages, and towns, otherwise known as places. This essentially sets up your area of interest, your area of primary interest. Let's start with the county list. All right, so here in Wisconsin, I am located just outside of Milwaukee. That's Milwaukee County. Zaki is just north of Milwaukee County, and Waukesha. All right, so these are 3 counties that I'm going to say are in my region. So if this was my service area, I would say 3 county service area, or however you identify your community. Then what I do is I generate a report, generate an area. The reason why this step is important is because BroadStreet does assemble data from all over, many, many different places. We assemble and share good data. And if for whatever reason that good data are only available at the zip code level or only available at the city level, like the 500 cities data used to be, then we at least have some backup regions. But primarily everything will be calculated at this region. All right, then I click next. Now what it's doing on the back end is basically behind the scenes. It's taking all of those cards that it wants to build, those data cards that it wants to build. You saw a bit of a glimpse of them. It's taking all those cards that it wants to build and is pulling data from those 3 counties and pulling that information together in summarized reports and summarized data. And the best thing to do here is to view, and I can show you how to edit the story in just a minute. All right, so here is the custom story for that 3 county region in Wisconsin. We have some great background provided by Calais around what trends are like in the US for sexually transmitted infections, and also some information on how to read this report. Essentially, the outline is that we start with screening recommendations. We really like to showcase health outcomes that are preventable, so that if you're investing in an intervention of some kind, that we make sure to maximize that investment. And so we'll look at the US Preventive Service Task Force screening recommendations. Then we'll go into demographics. As we mentioned, we like to include different risk and protective factors as part of the social determinants. We'll look at an overview of our community. We'll look at youth as a risk factor, and we'll also look at race and ethnicity as a risk factor. And then we'll do a spotlight on HIV, syphilis, chlamydia and gonorrhea, and hepatitis C. All right, this gives a little bit of background on cards. Here are the US Preventive Service Task Force screening recommendations. And then we get into the data cards. So one thing that's really fun and interesting about data cards is that they are interactive. If I wanted to share this report with colleagues, then whatever device they're on, they'll be able to interact with these cards. And of course, if you are interested in seeing more detail, then you can. And even if you're interested in downloading this or sharing it, then you're able to. If you wanted to direct someone directly to this card, because maybe something was interesting about the age distribution, then you can copy the direct link to the card. You can also, with any card, save it to another story. I've got a lot of stories, and there they all are. You can save it to another story. You can also download it. So if you have a PowerPoint presentation or a Word document that you're assembling, then this makes a great high quality image. And you can also share it directly to Twitter. This is one of our newer features. And I've already set up my connected accounts to Twitter, and I can actually post it directly to there. Anyone who sees it can look at the interactive version of the card. So there's lots of ways to share it. And obviously sharing good information is very important to us. And We ensure that our data is the best it can be. This draws on the American Community Survey. So a few of you mentioned that you are familiar with the American Community Survey. It is done by the US Census Bureau. It's done every 3 to 5, it's 3 to 5 years. It's essentially a rolling survey that happens between census years, and they do small area estimates of honestly thousands of different indicators in different increments and summaries. We like to use the 5-year estimates. All right. All right, so with this, I will know the median age and also looking at the race and ethnicity there. All right, then we go into youth as a risk factor. So here you can see different age of youths. So 15 to 19 years old, with the darker colors representing a higher percent of those individuals. There are different ages living in different places around the Milwaukee region. And if you are interested in males or females, then those are available to you. Now, these are a little bit different in that they are map cards. So map cards are actually linked to our map room. There's a nice interactive map here where you can see different things. You can zoom in, but if you really want to get a good glimpse or maybe want to view the rest of the US, then you can also view it in the map room, and that will take you to the map room. Do I dare do it now? I might do it at the end. Let's wait. All right, and then similar for race ethnicity, we did draw on data from the US Census Bureau, looking at data by race ethnicity, and particularly the races and ethnicities that are associated with higher rates of HIV, syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia, and hep C. All right, then we do spotlight different STIs, such as HIV, looking at the different benchmarks at the state and also national level. So the combined cases for HIV are still lower than what we would see for the national rates here in Wisconsin. All right, so I'm gonna go into syphilis. All right, we do, in this case, distinguish between active and latent syphilis. We do use the CDC Atlas Plus data. The CDC Atlas Plus is a really great tool. We really like it. We think the data is outstanding, and it's assembled by the CDC. If you ever want to explore the data here, we really do recommend it. Obviously, we love our maps and our graphs, but if you ever want to get it straight from the source, this is where you go. I will say that the data on STIs is actually very good, and that's because there's national reporting. It's something, they're all reportable diseases in many cases, and each state has its own data tracking system and then reports to the CDC. So I'm going to say that STI data is actually pretty good. All right. Having said that, when rates are so low, sometimes you'll see missing data there. And then we do the same for chlamydia and gonorrhea. So you can see that in our community, the combined 3-county region is going higher than what would we consider for state and national benchmarks. So hopefully by the end of this report, the picture that we're getting is where we should focus our efforts if we're investing in interventions for STIs. And we also have promising interventions here, and we obviously thank the county health rankings and roadmaps, What Works for Health, as they do a really great job of summarizing that data. If you want to run some more reports too, so that's just a little bit of a walkthrough. I will say that if any part of this report doesn't quite resonate with you, maybe you don't like that I'm calling them STIs, you'd rather call them STDs, maybe you have different sets that you focus on, that's absolutely okay. All of our reports are very cognizant of the different regional efforts and different regional initiatives that are happening, which is why we make it possible to edit. So for instance, if I use slightly different terminology in my coalition, that can easily change. We can edit it here. And then if I save it, then instantly when I view it again, then the live version that maybe I'd be sharing with others is visible. You can also change out different areas. If you're like, oh, this is nice about the cost in the US, but I don't really need it, you can actually delete the sections. And if you really miss it, then don't worry, because the template's still there. Also, with any cards, you can shuffle and save them. So for instance, some of our cards, you might notice the rates were not high enough to be reported. In those cases, you can actually remove the cards too. So I've just shuffled the cards there. You can actually remove the cards as well. And this looks really scary, but honestly, it just deletes the card from the report. And again, don't worry, you can always add the card back later and it's always going to be available in the template. If you wanted to move sections around, that's absolutely okay too. I will say that a lot of our people use our templates and might pull out different graphics for reports and such. So please feel free to do that. All right, I will pause there with a little bit of space to ask questions. All right, a great question came in about, do counties have to be continuous or connected? The answer to that is no. If you have a few different sites and they're pretty far away from each other, it doesn't matter. We'll summarize the data for both of those sites together. Great question, thank you. All right, any other questions? Ooh, what do I have to do to get started? All right, to get started, the one thing I didn't show you was the login process. So if you were to go to BroadStreet.io and you see that login screen, the very first thing to do is to, let's just go there. Let's show you. All right, so if I were to log out, okay, so here I obviously have a sign-in screen. If you haven't signed up yet, please click on Need a Membership, sign up. And once you do, then it'll ask you for your email address and you can validate your email address via email. If you're sick and tired of trying to keep track of all your different logins, you can also sign in with Google. That's really important to make sure that you click that Need a Membership, sign up if you're not yet a member. All right, and then after that, you can get started. And if there's a prompt for a membership, you can close it and reopen it when the time comes when you've run more than 3 reports. Great question, thank you. Okay, I'm working with a group of people, and what if I don't want to edit the report, but I have somebody else who might? Okay, so this is a really great question too. So on the BroadStreet site, you are able to share it with different collaborators. You can copy the read-only link. You can also invite collaborators via email. If you were to add a collaborator here, you can choose whether or not they have access to edit the report. The other place to do this is actually from within the editor. Oh, and I'll sign in. All right, so here I'm in the editor, and within settings, I can add collaborators here. Right now you can see that it's only me, but if I were to add Calais, for instance, in this report as a collaborator, then both of us would be able to edit it. I can invite them as a collaborator via private link or even invite via email. So this works similarly to other shared documents where you invite them to a shared link. And then Calais will get edit access as well. Great questions. All right. We are just about at time. I want to thank Calais for letting me showcase her awesome work. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you for joining us here on Zoom. And for those of you joining on Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter, and LinkedIn, have a wonderful, wonderful day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.